I don't go to that park anymore. I haven't stepped foot near it in over 3 years. And honestly, I don't think I ever will again. The weird part is, nothing about that place ever felt dangerous before that night. It was just a normal neighborhood playground in a quiet part of town, the kind of place where kids ride their bikes during the day and parents sit on benches, scrolling through their phones. But what happened there one night completely changed the way I see places like that. It happened in late September, just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I was 19 at the time, and I used to hang out there pretty often with a couple of friends because it stayed open late and was usually empty at night. That night, though, I was there alone. I had just gotten off a late shift at a grocery store about 10 minutes away, and instead of going straight home, I decided to stop by the park to clear my head. It was around 11:30 p.m., and the weather was cool, not too cold, just that early fall kind of air where everything feels still. When I got there, the parking lot was empty. That wasn't unusual, so I didn't think much of it. I parked near the edge of the lot, right next to a broken street lamp that flickered every few seconds. I remember noticing that right away, how the light would buzz softly and then dim before coming back on. It gave the whole area this weird, uneven lighting. The playground itself was maybe about 50 feet from where I parked. It had a swing set, a small jungle gym, and one of those plastic slides. Nothing big, just a basic setup. I got out of my car and walked over to the swings, mostly out of habit. I sat down on one and just kind of rocked back and forth slowly, checking my phone, listening to music. For the first 10 minutes or so, everything was normal, completely quiet. No cars passing by, no people, nothing. Then I noticed something that didn't really register as strange at first. There was another car. It was parked on the opposite side of the lot, partially hidden under a tree. I don't know how I missed it when I first pulled in, but it was definitely there now. It was an older sedan, dark colored, maybe black or navy. The windows were tinted enough that I couldn't see inside clearly. At first, I assumed someone else had just pulled in after me, but I hadn't heard any engine or seen headlights. That's when I started paying more attention. I took my earbuds out and just listened. Everything was still completely silent. No doors opening, no footsteps, nothing. I remember feeling this slight tension in my chest. Like something wasn't adding up. I stood up from the swing and looked toward the car more directly. That's when I saw a movement. It was subtle, but definitely there. The driver's side door opened just a few inches, then stopped. It didn't swing open fully, just enough to create a small gap. And then it stayed like that. No one got out. No one said anything. It just stayed slightly open. I don't know why, but that immediately made me uncomfortable. I told myself it was probably just someone sitting in their car, maybe on their phone or something, but the way the door opened like that, it didn't feel normal. I started to feel like I shouldn't be there anymore. I grabbed my phone and keys and began walking back toward my car, trying not to look too obvious or rushed. As I got closer, I glanced back one more time. The door was still open, exactly the same way. But now, I could see something else. There was someone standing just outside the car, partially hidden behind the door. I hadn't seen them step out. I hadn't heard anything. But they were definitely there now. I couldn't make out their face because of the shadows, but I could tell they were watching me. Not moving, not saying anything, just standing there. That's when my instincts really kicked in. I got into my car quickly, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I was backing out, I kept my eyes on that car. The person didn't move. They just stood there, still partially hidden behind the door, facing in my direction. I remember thinking how unnatural it looked, like they were deliberately trying not to be fully seen. I pulled out of the lot and onto the main road, trying to calm myself down. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just someone taking a break. Maybe they didn't want to be bothered, but something about the way they stood there stuck with me. It didn't feel right. About 2 minutes down the road, I checked my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It's a road. Obviously, there are going to be cars. But then I noticed how close they were, and how they stayed that close, even when I sped up a little. I turned onto another street, one that led toward my neighborhood. The car turned too. That's when the feeling came back, stronger this time. I tried to get a better look at the car behind me. Same shape, same dark color. My stomach dropped. I made another turn. They followed again. At that point, I knew something was wrong. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove toward a gas station that I knew stayed open 24/7. I figured if this person was actually following me, they wouldn't pull into a well-lit place with cameras. As I pulled into the gas station, the car behind me slowed down. For a second, I thought they were going to follow me in, but instead, they just stopped at the entrance, sat there for a few seconds, and then slowly drove off. I stayed in my car for a while after that, just trying to process what had happened. Eventually, I went inside, bought a drink, and waited another 10 minutes before heading home. I kept checking my mirrors the entire way back, but I didn't see the car again. I told a couple of my friends about it the next day, and they all agreed it sounded creepy, but none of us really had an explanation. For a while, I just avoided going to the park at night. Eventually, I stopped going altogether. About a month later, though, something happened that made everything feel a lot worse. I was scrolling through a local community Facebook group when I saw a post that caught my attention. It was from a woman who lived a few streets away from that park. She said her teenage son had gone missing for a few hours after going out to ride his bike late at night. He eventually came back, but he was shaken and refused to talk about what happened. The only thing he told his parents was that someone in a car had been watching him at the park. When I read that, I felt this cold wave hit me. The timing lined up almost exactly with the night I was there. In the description, it was too similar to be a coincidence. I don't know who that person was. I don't know what they were doing there. But I'm pretty sure if I had stayed at that park any longer that night, things could have gone very differently. Even now, sometimes when I'm driving at night and I see a car parked in a dark corner somewhere, I get that same feeling again. And every time I think back to that playground and that car, and the way that door slowly opened just enough for someone to watch without being seen. I used to think nothing really bad could happen in a place as open as a playground, especially one that sat right in the middle of a quiet neighborhood. It felt too exposed, too normal. That's probably why I didn't question it when my younger cousin asked me to take him there one evening. This happened last summer, just outside of Aurora. I was 22 at the time, staying with my aunt for a couple of weeks, while I figured out some work stuff. In most evenings, I'd end up watching my cousin, Eli. He was 8, full of energy, and obsessed with this one playground about 3 blocks from their house. It had a bigger setup than most, multiple slides, climbing structures, and a long row of swings that stretched along the edge of the park. That night, it was just starting to get dark when he begged me to take him. I remember hesitating at first because it was later than usual, but it was still summer and there were a few families out when we arrived, so it didn't seem like a big deal. The sun was low, casting that orange glow across everything, and for a while, it felt completely normal. Eli ran straight to the climbing structure while I sat on one of the benches nearby, scrolling through my phone and keeping an eye on him. Over the next 20 minutes, the park slowly started to empty out. One family left, then another, until eventually it was just us. I didn't notice exactly when that happened, but at some point, the background noise of kids playing just disappeared. It got quiet in a way that felt a little too sudden. I looked up from my phone and scanned the park. Empty. The houses around the park had their lights on, but none of the backyards were active. No one walking dogs, no one outside, just stillness. 5 more minutes, I called out to Eli. He didn't respond, which wasn't unusual, so I got up and walked closer to the playground. That's when I noticed he wasn't where I expected him to be. He had been on the climbing structure, but now it was empty. I felt a quick jolt of panic before I spotted him near the swings, standing completely still. That alone was weird. He was usually running around non-stop, not just standing in one place. Eli? I called, walking toward him. He didn't turn around. As I got closer, I realized he wasn't alone. There was someone else there. A man was standing a few feet in front of him, near the swing set. He had his back partially turned to me, and from a distance, he just looked like a regular adult. Average height, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. Nothing that immediately stood out. But something about the way Eli was standing, completely silent, not moving, made my chest tighten. I picked up my pace. "Hey," I called out louder this time. The man slowly turned his head toward me. just enough for me to see part of his face. It was hard to make out details in the low light, but I could tell he was looking directly at me. Not surprised, not caught off guard, just aware. "We're leaving," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I reached Eli and placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched slightly, like I had startled him, even though I was right there. That was another thing that didn't feel right. "Come on," I told him quietly. The man didn't say anything. He didn't move closer or farther away. He just stood there, watching us. As we started walking back toward the path, I felt his eyes on us the entire time. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. It's hard to explain, but it was like this heavy, focused attention that didn't let up. Once we reached the sidewalk, I finally glanced over my shoulder. The man was still there, standing by the swings, facing in our direction, but now he was holding something. It looked like one of the swings, gripping the chain loosely with one hand, and he was slowly pulling it back, letting it go, over and over again. Not enough to make it swing high, just enough to keep it moving. I turned away quickly and kept walking. Eli was unusually quiet the entire way home. Normally, he'd be talking nonstop about what he played, or asking questions. But this time, he just walked beside me, looking down at the ground. "What were you doing over there?" I asked after a minute. He didn't answer right away. "He told me to wait," he finally said, his voice low. I stopped walking. "Who did?" He didn't need to answer. I already knew. "What do you mean, wait?" I asked. Eli shrugged slightly, still not looking up. "He said you were coming, and to just stay there." That sent this cold feeling straight through me. "Did you talk to him before that?" I asked. "No," Eli said. "He just came up and said that." We started walking again, but now my mind was racing. That man knew I was there, or at least assumed I was, and he used that to keep Eli in place. That didn't feel random at all. When we got back to the house, I told my aunt everything. She immediately locked all the doors and windows and kept Eli inside for the rest of the night. We considered calling the police, but we didn't have much to report beyond a vague description of a guy at a park. It felt like it wouldn't go anywhere. For the next few days, nothing happened. No one suspicious around the house, no signs of anyone watching us, but Eli refused to go back to that playground, even during the day, even with other kids around. That alone said a lot. About a week later, I was out driving in the area, running an errand, when I passed by the park again. It was early evening, still light out, and there were a few people there. For a second, I considered stopping, just to see if anything felt off during the day, but as I slowed down near the entrance, I noticed something that made me keep going. There was a man standing near the swings. Same general build, same kind of dark clothing. I couldn't see his face clearly from the road, but the posture, the stillness, it all felt too familiar. He wasn't interacting with anyone, just standing there, watching. I didn't stop. I drove straight past and didn't look back. A couple of days after that, my aunt mentioned something she'd seen in a neighborhood group online. Apparently, a few parents had reported a man lingering around local parks, approaching kids when they were briefly unattended. No one had been hurt, at least not that we knew of, but the descriptions were close enough to what I had seen that it didn't feel like a coincidence. After that, we made sure Eli was never outside alone, even for a minute. And we definitely never went back to that playground. I still think about that night sometimes. The way Eli was just standing there, completely still, like he had been told exactly what to do and didn't question it. The way that man didn't react when I showed up, like he expected it, and the way he stayed there, calmly moving that swing back and forth even after we left. It's one of those things that doesn't have a clear ending. Nothing dramatic happened, no confrontation, no clear explanation. But sometimes that's what makes it worse, because whatever that man was planning, whatever he was doing there, it didn't stop that night. It just didn't happen to us. I used to think playgrounds were some of the safest places you could be at night. They're open, visible, usually surrounded by houses, and there's nothing really there worth stealing. That's probably why I didn't think twice about cutting through one on my way home. This happened about 2 years ago in a suburb outside of Portland. I was 21, working late shifts at a warehouse, and my route home was mostly empty streets and quiet neighborhoods. About halfway through, there was this small public park with a playground in the center. During the day, it was always full of kids, but at night, it was completely dead. I'd walked through it dozens of times without any problems. That night, it was a little after midnight when I got there. The streetlights around the park were on, but a couple of them had that dim, yellowish glow that barely lit anything. The playground itself sat in this shallow dip in the ground, almost like a bowl. So once you walked down toward it, the street behind you kind of disappeared from view. I remember noticing how quiet it was. No wind, no cars, nothing. Just that weird kind of silence where you start hearing your own footsteps more than anything else. I had my hood up and my hands in my pockets, just trying to get home. As I stepped onto the rubber playground surface, I saw something that made me slow down. One of the swings was moving. Not a lot, just a gentle back and forth, like someone had pushed it a minute ago and it hadn't fully stopped yet. I stood there for a second, trying to figure it out. There was no one on it, no one anywhere around the playground. I even looked toward the tree line and the benches, but everything was empty. At first, I told myself it was probably the wind. Even though I hadn't felt any, I kept walking, trying not to make a big deal out of it. As I got closer to the middle of the playground, I noticed something else. There was a backpack sitting at the base of the slide. It looked like a kid's backpack, small, with one of those cartoon designs on it. That immediately felt off. It was way too late for any kid to be there, and there were no adults around either. I stopped again, just staring at it. Part of me thought maybe someone had forgotten it earlier in the day, but then I realized something that made my stomach drop a little. The zipper was open, and one of the straps was stretched out like it had just been dropped. It didn't look like it had been sitting there all day. I remember debating whether I should just leave or check it. Curiosity got the better of me. I took a few steps closer, glancing around again to make sure I was still alone. When I reached the backpack, I crouched down and looked inside. There were a few things in there, some notebooks, a water bottle, and what looked like a small flashlight. Nothing unusual, except for one thing. The flashlight was on. It was pointing downward into the bag, creating this faint glow from inside. That made no sense. Why would someone leave a flashlight on inside their backpack? That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound. It came from somewhere behind me, near the swings. I froze immediately. The sound stopped as soon as I did. For a few seconds, I didn't move at all. Then I slowly turned my head. The swing that had been moving earlier was still going, but now it was swinging a little higher. Not violently, but enough that it definitely wasn't slowing down anymore. It looked like someone had just given it another push. I stood up quickly, my heart starting to race. "Hello?" I called out, even though I didn't expect an answer. There was nothing, just silence again. But now it felt different, heavier somehow. I started backing away from the playground, keeping my eyes on the swings. That's when I noticed something else. There was a figure standing near the edge of the park, right where the shadows from the trees got thickest. I hadn't seen them before. They were just there, completely still. I couldn't make out any details, just the outline of a person, maybe average height, wearing something dark. They weren't moving, not even shifting their weight, just standing there, facing in my direction. My first thought was that it might be the owner of the backpack, but something about the way they stood there didn't feel normal. If it was their bag, why weren't they saying anything? Why just stand there in the dark? I took another step back, then another. The figure didn't react. That almost made it worse. It felt like they were waiting for something. I turned and started walking faster toward the exit path on the other side of the park. I didn't want to run yet, but every instinct in my body was telling me to get out of there. As I reached the edge of the playground and started up the slight incline toward the street, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I didn't turn around right away. I just kept walking, trying to stay calm. The footsteps continued, matching my pace at first, then gradually getting a little faster. That's when I broke. I started running. I didn't care how it looked or sounded. I just ran straight up the path and onto the sidewalk. As soon as I reached the street, I glanced back. The playground was partially hidden again by the dip in the ground, but I could still see the top of the swing set, and I could see the figure. They had moved closer. They were now standing near the swings, right where I had been a minute ago, still facing me, still not running, just watching. I kept running until I was a full block away. Only then did I slow down and check behind me again. The figure was gone. I stood there for a while, trying to catch my breath, replaying everything in my head. The backpack, the flashlight, the swings, the way that person just stood there and then followed me without saying a word. It didn't feel random. It felt intentional, like I had walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. The next day I decided to go back, but not at night. I went in the afternoon, when the park was busy. Kids were playing, parents were sitting on benches. Everything looked completely normal. I walked over to the playground and checked near the slide. The backpack was gone. I asked one of the parents nearby if they had seen it earlier, just trying to sound casual. They said no, nothing like that. I even checked the local Lost and found posts online later that day. Nothing. No mention of a missing bag, no reports of anything unusual at the park. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was just some weird coincidence. Maybe it was someone messing around. Maybe the bag belonged to them and they just didn't want to be seen, but that doesn't explain the flashlight being on, or the way they followed me without saying anything, or the way they just stood there watching. About a week later, something happened that made it harder to ignore. I was at work during a break, scrolling through my phone, when I saw a news post about a nearby neighborhood. It mentioned a report from a parent who claimed their child had been approached by a stranger at a park late in the evening. The details were vague, but the location was close enough to where I had been. Same general area. That's when everything started to feel connected in a way I couldn't explain. I don't know what that person was doing at the playground that night. I don't know if the backpack was bait or if it actually belonged to someone. And I definitely don't know what would have happened if I had stayed there longer or tried to confront them. All I know is that ever since that night, I don't cut through that park anymore. I take the longer route, even if it adds 10 minutes to my walk. Because every time I think about that place now, I don't picture kids playing or families hanging out. I picture that swing moving on its own, that backpack sitting there with the light still on, and that figure standing in the dark, waiting just long enough for someone like me to walk in.